morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bodybuilding.com podcast here in dark, dreary Boise, Idaho. Winter number 2 has started, and so we decided to invite somebody from the Southern Hemisphere up here to enjoy it with us. I'm Nick Coleus. I'm the guy who's always here for these things, as is Heather Eastman. And our guest today is a registered nurse, emergency nurse, which is great because I was out of work yesterday. I'm very, very, very sick. I have this horrible little flu. So do you give sympathy as a nurse? I don't need care, but I might need some sympathy.
Look, I'm working on it.
Okay, that's good enough. We don't know each other well enough for you to sympathize, I guess, at this point. She's Paige Mills. She's a power lifter. Just had a meet recently. Strength coach and rising labs athlete from the Victoria province in Australia, right? And she's in town shooting some photos with us, getting some articles going for the always thirsty Bodybuilding.com readership. How do you pronounce the name of the town you come from?
I'm from Geelong.
Geelong. Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah, there are a few different ways. So that's an interesting sounding town.
Yeah, I didn't know it was interesting sounding until many Americans told me it was interesting sounding.
Geelong.
It's near Melbourne, an hour from Melbourne.
So now I want to ask you about a bunch of things. Your shipping container gym is one of them. That thing looks awesome. Heavy lifting, of course, but also TV or the lack thereof. I've read a few interviews with you where you talk about how not having a functioning television is part of your fitness success. And as somebody who's like, I don't have a TV. I don't like to broadcast it.
I was going to say you broadcast. That's a fact I knew about you.
No, but I always like to talk to somebody who says, you know what, I'm just opting out. Tell me about your relationship with TV and fitness a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I'm cheating a bit because I do watch a bit of Netflix.
Of course, hey, that's fine. It's a public utility. You have to.
Right, yeah. But yeah, I try and keep obviously the more that screen time becomes my job, the less I enjoy it. Right. So when people are like, oh, you should get Snapchat, I'm like, are you kidding? I do not want another app that I don't need to have. So I guess TV falls under that banner, and I just try and keep it minimal, I guess. So I'll watch like a 20-minute episode of something at night, maybe 2. Usually it's Forensic Files, and then I go to bed. And that's it. It's
kind of nice to be able to just take those tiny little doses like that, though, isn't it? I mean, as opposed to like I grew up in a house like anybody else where the TV was occasionally just sort of on, floating through life, and you don't even really realize how much it starts to seep into you. It just take up time.
Yes.
It's a real time suck, you know?
Yeah. I'm really grateful that, like, when I was a kid, we had to sit down dinner every night. We all set the table together. One person kind of helped with the salad and whatever, and then we turned the TV off, and we all just, sometimes we didn't have anything to really talk about, but we at least didn't have that, like, horrible sound in the background all the time.
Right.
So maybe that's where it comes from.
Well, and I mean, I know some people tell me, oh, I like to have TV because it's my time to sit there on the foam roller, on the lacrosse ball, anything like that. Do you find that you miss out on that, or are you still able to sort of put your self-care time in there as needed?
I'm pretty much like a beached whale when I am watching TV. I'm just like spread out and not moving. And I really enjoy the time. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but I get really bad like productivity guilt. And so if I'm not doing anything for a while, or I'll watch a movie and halfway through the movie, I'm like, I'll just send a few emails while I'm watching this. I feel guilty for not doing anything.
Sure. Well, I mean, and to be clear, you have a job that's a pretty physical job, is it not?
Yes.
I don't know how much you actually have to lift people as an emergency nurse, and maybe not as much as people expect.
No, not as much as people expect. We have actually really fantastic policies in our hospitals around like no lift policies to avoid like workplace injuries and things. But I mean, you're on your feet the whole time, and I work in emergency, so it's like hustle and bustle. I'm in a public hospital, and it's one of the busiest in the country, I believe. So yeah, it's chaos. I'm on my feet all day, but.
And were you were a nurse first before you got into pretty serious training?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sort of my last year of uni, I found sort of the gym, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious about how you kind of found a sweet spot of training where you could balance the two of them. Like when I'm training, I like to use how I play with my kids as a barometer. I'm like, all right, if I can run them into the ground, then it's perfect. But if I can't play, I'm too tired, then I find like, all right, I'm training too hard. How hard was it for you to find that balance initially? And why did you even get into training when you were nursing?
Well, I might actually contradict myself a bit here because I just talked about how physical nursing is. But prior to nursing, I was like a builder's labor on a construction site. I was like working on farms doing maintenance and things. And I grew up with horses. I was training horses. And so I was always lifting like saddles and like, moving horses around.
Lifting, or at least was part of what you were doing.
Yeah, I was very physically active at the very least. And then when I started nursing, I was like, I'm indoors all the time. And obviously university is less physical than actually working as a nurse because I'm doing a lot of studying, a lot of sitting down, a lot of going to classes. And I was like, I've just got energy to burn at the end of the day. And I found that I was like twiddling my thumbs at the end of the day. And I just wanted to burn some energy. So that's kind of how I started seeking out something physical to do.
How quickly did you discover that you could lift heavy? That it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just going to go burn some energy. It was like, oh, like
right. Powerlifting isn't what somebody thinks of necessarily when they say, you know what, I'm going to just burn a little energy.
I think like
70%, 75% deadlift, just burn some energy.
Well, I don't think anyone goes straight into powerlifting. I think people get either accidentally strong and they go, oh crap, maybe I'd be okay at powerlifting, or they start bodybuilding and they can't diet. And they're like, well, if I can't get shredded, I guess I'll just get strong. So it was kind of a combination of both for me. So I sort of tried CrossFit for a couple of months and then did nothing for a year or so before I found lifting weights. But I found with the CrossFit that I hated the running. I hated sort of the cardiovascular part of it, and I just wanted to lift the weights. And so I was kind of like, oh, well, if I don't like running, I'm just never going to be a fit person, and exercise just isn't for me. And then a couple of years later, I was talking to someone and they were like, why don't you just lift weights if that's all you like? And I was like, oh, is that a thing? Do people do that? And they're like, dude, that's what bodybuilding is. So yeah, I just joined like a commercial gym, and I Googled bodybuilding program online, and guess what the first result was? Bodybuilding.com.
Right.
And so yeah, I followed the same program for like a few months, and then I started to like get bored of the exercises, so I would Google like substitute for lateral raise, and I would find something else, and that's just what I did for like 2 years. And then one day I tested my squat 1RM. I was 100 kilos, and I was about 65 kilos at the time, and my friend whose partner was a strength coach, he was like, that's like pretty good for your like size, and considering you don't really train for strength and whatever. And I was like, nah. And then, I just ended up, that's how I sort of got into it. I just found that I had a heavy squat and a heavy deadlift, and then I thought, well, I can learn to bench.
It's interesting you're talking about not wanting to run as well, because, I mean, don't you just work in a cardio setting, basically? Isn't being a nurse cardio?
Yeah, sure, right. But I'm actually like really lazy in that, like, I'll drive around like the supermarket parking lot for 20 minutes to find the closest park. So
I thought you were going to say you take a little cart around the supermarket like you're on the...
We don't have those. We don't have those, the electric ones.
So now, one thing I heard you saying that was interesting to me was that you followed the same program repeatedly for months and months at a time. And a lot of people like look down on that approach, but we've heard from a number of people over the years that it's actually a really valuable approach for them to just not necessarily do the same workout every day, but to do a program and just kind of repeat it and get better at it and get better at it. What kind of a program was it, and what do you feel like doing that gave you?
So squats were my favorite, and I was squatting twice a week, and I just thought that all anyone did was 4 sets of 12 of everything. So I was doing 4 sets of 12 of like at least bodyweight squats twice a week, every single week. And like in hindsight, that is so much volume, and no wonder my squat built up so much. I couldn't breathe through 12 squats now. But I just did a lot of the same rep ranges, and I think it built a hypertrophy basis. But I think one, obviously we know beginner gains is a thing, and that's probably why I put on so much size and strength. But forgot where I was going with this. I'm so sorry.
Something about squatting and building your base. Well, we were talking about basically, following the same program for months and months.
And why it worked. I think too, like I had accidentally chosen core exercises. I didn't know that I'd done that, but I was doing primarily compound lifts, and then just finishing it off with fun isolation things. But I think there was, I didn't know what progressive overload was. I didn't know the term, but I think most importantly, I was pushing myself every single time I went to the gym. I was working hard, and I think that's what's key. I think that if you work really, really hard at whatever you're doing in the gym, you're going to see gains.
And looking back at the way that you squatted then, do you look at that and go, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't hurt myself? Or were you actually pretty good from a pretty early time?
I think I just like rolled the dice, and I was just lucky. I think it was just luck. But there was a tiny bit of guidance in my earlier CrossFit stuff that I did. But I remember I went to a personal trainer for the first time, a powerlifting coach. I said to him, I'm like, look, I've been squatting like twice a week. I've never had anyone look at my squat. I've just switched to low bar. I want to start powerlifting. Can you look at my squat? And he looked at it and he gave me some tips that will like help me get more out of it. But he's like, you're not doing anything wrong. He said, you are doing everything right. It is safe for you to max out your squat. And I feel like that might sound like a waste of a session, like, oh, I just paid all this money for this coaching session to tell me that not to change anything. But that gave me so much confidence. I think a coach's job is sometimes to tell you that you're doing everything right, and is to sometimes say nothing. And so that gave me all the confidence. And then I just started squatting heavy, and it just, my 1RM just flew up after that.
That's interesting that you say you did 4 sets of 12 forever though too, and it actually built that up.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in high rep squats. I feel like they actually do a lot more than people realize, not only in building strength, but building kind of, that capillary density in the legs. And twice a week though, that is a serious amount of squatting.
Yeah, a lot. It could have been more because I was doing like a 4-day split, but I wasn't necessarily doing it Monday to Friday. So I might do day 1 twice in the week. Does that make sense? I might train 6 days, but a 4-day split.
So it was a little intuitive, your approach to this.
Yeah. I don't know how. Honestly, I think I was just Googling. I was just Googling the crap out of everything. And I remember I would have a program on my phone, in the notes in my phone, and it would say, machine chest press next. And I would sit on the exercise on the machine before that, and I'd be Googling what is a machine chest press, because I didn't want to walk around reading the plaques on all of the machines. So I was just Googling how to do exercises while I was on the one before. This is not a very good sales pitch for me being a coach.
No,
you were.
All coaches kind of find their way. And it's interesting because you talked about finding fun isolation exercises, and you came up with a list of exercises for what we shot yesterday that even I hadn't heard of. And I've gone through all 2,800 exercises in our exercise database. So was that just pure Googling, or how did you kind of find these special lifts like the Copenhagen plank, which I'd seen. I'd never heard it.
Copenhagen plank.
I'd never heard it called that, though. I'd seen it in the gym, and I was like, that looks crazy, and I'll never try it.
Bernie adductor. Yeah.
I'm going to make you do it now. The Copenhagen plank actually came from, I actually learned that from a physio who I have immense lower back issues. And that was something that we thought that maybe it was a core weakness, and that was something that we implemented. But also, sometimes I'll do a strength block in pulling sumo instead of conventional, and I find that my adductors are just on fire. They can't handle it the way the rest of my body can. So they're obviously a weakness there, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because a Copenhagen plank, for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a kind of side plank, but your top leg is on a bench or something like that. You can perform it with a bent knee or with a straight knee. It looks like I saw an Instagram post where you're performing it with a straight leg. It looked like. It's a great bracing tool, but it's also an unbelievable adductor movement.
It's insane.
How do you feel like that has helped your lower back pain in particular? Somebody who's had lower back pain in the past, I'm curious about that.
It's more the planking aspect of it is, I think, good for my core. But I think now I've done a little bit more. I've seen so many physicians about my back, and I think now we've kind of put it down to a glute weakness. So we might have been missing the target a bit there in working on my core, but you can never have too much core strength.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, sometimes it's a moving target. All those sorts of things are, especially when you're doing things like competing in powerlifting. Yeah. So now you mentioned that you just had a meet recently. How many meets have you actually competed in?
I think this might be my 4th sanctioned meet.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So going for the last couple of years, or how many years have you been doing this?
Only I think my first powerlifting meet was about 2 years ago.
I saw one in 2018 on Open Powerlifting.
Oh yeah, yeah. You've been doing your research.
A little bit. Okay, so how has that experience been for you? Because I know some people, powerlifting meets are getting incredibly popular for women in the United States. There are women's only meets that just draw hundreds and hundreds of lifters. And it's a great event, but I think, at the same time, it's a performance thing, and it's a number, and some people go there and can just be incredibly disappointed. I worked and I worked and I worked and I got a number. How do I feel now? Am I happy about this?
Yeah,
was it satisfying? Was it worth it?
Yeah.
How is that process for you?
I think I go in, I think a lot of people go in there and they want to hit PRs, and that's all they care about. And they're like, I've deadlifted 150.
Or win. Yeah.
Or win, yeah, sure. But I think that winning is a bit of a silly goal, because I have put up amazing performances, and come at Nationals I came 4th, and I think I did so well, and I hit massive PRs, numbers I never thought I could hit, right? And then I've won a competition, came first, and I won by 100 kilos. So if I hadn't benched at all, I still would have won. So I think that your placing isn't a very good measurement of how well you have done, because it's all about who rocks up on the day. And if my best squat's 155 kilos, if there's a girl at a meet who can squat 200 kilos, there's nothing I can do about that.
Right.
There's nothing I can do on the day, which I also think is why I don't get nervous. Because it's not like a dance where I could miss a step or make a silly mistake. I just feel like I'm only as strong as I am, and I'm here to demonstrate that.
That seems like the right approach. But I mean, at the same time, going to multiple lifts, there's always that little voice maybe in the back of your head, like, I could do this. I could be amazing at this.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that because powerlifting for me happened really quickly. So I think there was like 8 months between me hearing what powerlifting was and coming fourth at nationals. And I dropped a weight class in that time and had to qualify. So it was like happened so quickly. And I was like, man, I'm fourth in the country. I've been doing this for 8 months. I'm going to be the best in the world. I'm going to be the best powerlifter.
I'm like the Michael Jordan of women's powerlifting. Right? I didn't realize it. Yeah.
And then it's just been setback after setback. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm just like another dude who lifts weights in the gym. But I love the sport, you know. But yeah, I think that definitely you're right. Like if you have a number in your head and you don't hit it on the day, it can be disappointing. Definitely.
So with 4 meets under your belt, do you feel like you still are going to keep going out there and doing this, or are your goals changing a little bit? Yeah,
I think so. But I think too, at the time that I was competing pretty aggressively, I had intentionally made it temporarily the primary focus or my primary goal in my life, I suppose. So I cut back on work for it, and I was just concentrating on like making weight, you know, dieting, nailing my sleep, nailing my nutrition, and nailing my training, and all the circumstances under which I was training were always perfect. I tried to control everything I could control. And I think that if you live like that versus if you are a full-time nurse who trains 4 days a week in your spare time, I don't think there's a huge difference in the amount of strength that you're able to gain. That's my opinion.
No, I think that there's a great lesson there, you know. Especially once you get good at something, there's the temptation to do more and more and more. But strength is incredibly taxing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a trend that I see in a lot of strength coaches right now telling people, you know what, 3 days a week is enough.
Absolutely.
And actually, you don't have to do 10 sets of anything. You can do 2 sets of something and actually give your body a pretty significant message still.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you feel like you dial back in your volume, or do you still feel that temptation? Like Casey Mitchell, who's a Rising Labs founder, he does unbelievable amounts of work.
Yeah.
Like there are people who they love that work and they can handle it, but other people can't.
Yeah. I feel like I can handle it. I just feel like I think I look back on like how much time I'm dedicating to powerlifting, and I thought when I'm 30 or 40, none of that's really going to matter, but I will have missed out on things because of it. Does that make sense?
She said, when I'm 30.
Yeah, I know.
I love when people say that. Like it's someday.
I said it and I was like, God, that's not that far away, is it?
Did you find that the power lifts came pretty easily to you? Obviously, you had a great squat, but benching and deadlifting, did you feel like they came pretty easily to you, or was it kind of a puzzle?
The deadlift was very much a problem for me for a really long time, and then it all fell together in a pretty short window, but it was way behind my other lifts. And then benching, I'm glad you asked. So like I said, I've been squatting for a long time and I've been deadlifting a little bit. And so those were understandably pretty good lifts of mine. And I was like, okay, I've never benched at all. Like benching just wasn't really a part of my thing, you know? And so I was doing like some dumbbell pressing and stuff. And I think like the 4th time I sat on a bench, I benched my body weight. And I didn't realize at the time, I thought everyone must be able to do this because I just walked in and did it. But I think that like maybe I had like a little bit of a natural gift for benching more so than the other lifts, I think.
Okay. And as you've got into coaching, you have a decent little community of clients, I imagine.
Yeah.
Do you find that they struggle with any of those lifts in particular? I imagine it's rather personal for each person.
Yeah, I think definitely it's very often that I have a beginner come in and I'm like, wow, you naturally have a lot of lower body strength. It is very rare that I get a female come in and I'm like, wow, you're going to have a big old bench, you know. But I was listening to a podcast many years ago with an American female powerlifter. She was a coach as well. And she said that it's kind of widely known that Australian women are terrible at benching. So I haven't heard it since. I don't know.
That's because everybody's afraid to tell you. I mean, I'll be honest, we knew that.
Did you really?
No.
Okay.
Speaking of bench press, you and I talked about the bench press yesterday, and you talked about how, and you mentioned something kind of in passing that I want to dig into a little bit, which is, you know, powerlifting, it's kind of cheating at the bench press by conventional gym standards. You know, these guys in the gym that are benching strict. And yet, as you described it, the way that powerlifters bench is actually very beneficial. And I wanted to see if I could kind of elaborate on like why you think it's cheating if you're actually using your muscles in a way that's more beneficial for your body.
Yeah. So I often get comments on my bench press, God love men on the internet, just saying like, oh, great bench press. But I think that if your back was flat and your hands were closer, it would be like you would get a lot more out of it. And they're absolutely right. If like chest and tricep hypertrophy was my goal, I would bring my hands right in and I would go dead flat. But that's not my goal. My goal is to shift as much weight as possible. And not arching in the bench press because it's cheating is like using a bike not using a bike in a triathlon because it's cheating. Like, cool, you worked harder than everyone else and you came dead last.
It's a sport. Yeah. It's a sport,
yeah,
people.
It's within the rules, you know.
Okay, so you've got a pretty decent arch.
Yeah. I used to. It's a little bit inhibited by my back injury, but definitely to a gen pop lifter, heck yes, I have a huge arch.
Well, if you think about it, that solves a lot of the problems that we talk about with the bench press, where you're putting all this strain on your shoulder joint because you're trying to lay flat on the bench. Whereas if you arch, you actually get into the correct position for your chest to fire, your back is firing. And you said yesterday, when you're doing it correctly, it's almost like your back is as tight as your chest.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you're really getting an all-around workout with this one lift.
Yeah, definitely. I can feel as much tension in my back when I'm benching and in my legs all over. You know, it's global tension is the goal, just adding power to my press. So everything is tight. Everything is working when I'm benching.
Do you find that women respond to that once they kind of learn how to bench in that way where they can actually use their entire upper body?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think that a lot of the things we change about a lift to kind of like make it more conducive to power, like for example, moving your hands out wider in the bench press. Generally speaking, everybody is more efficient there because your ROM has just been reduced, right? But if you've been benching close, you've got a strong chest and triceps and you probably don't have a very strong back yet. So it's going to take time to develop strength in this new position. However, I think using global tension and using leg drive like instantly adds kilos to everybody's 1RM.
Sure. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your shipping container gym. This is a fantasy of mine. My friend and I have talked about having a shipping container gym for years.
Really?
So, it's such a no-brainer.
I'm sorry, I beat you to it.
Yeah, no, I don't need to be the first one by any means. So tell me how that idea came to you and how you actually went about doing it.
Yeah, so I basically was working with a company who makes equipment and stuff, and they were like, man, like we'd love to work with you, like, you know, do you have space for equipment? And I live in so I bought my house when I was like very young, and I'm trying to stay in it for as long as possible, and it has a single car garage, and I have like 2 Jeeps, 2 motorbikes, 3 kayaks, like, and I'm like, man, I can't really set up a home gym. And then I thought it's not really financially viable to set up a gym just for my own training, you know. And so I thought, oh, what could I do? And I thought, you don't even need that much space for powerlifting. All I need to do is squat, bench and deadlift and maybe some dumbbells. I thought maybe if I coached other people in it, then it would be like financially viable. So I started looking around and I thought, I just need somewhere to put this container. I got quotes on having it built and whatever. I thought, where am I going to put it? Like I need a bathroom amenities as well. And so I started ringing real estate agents for like commercial properties. And I was like, hey, I want to put this like in a car park of like one of your industrial properties, you know, can you help me? And they all just thought I was an idiot. So I just started door knocking, and I just spent probably 3 months driving around where I live, just knocking on doors saying like, hey, is there a communal bathroom here? Can I put this in your parking lot? And eventually this couple who the landlords also work on site, and they were like, yes, you can put it wherever you want. That's a great idea. We love what you're doing. And they're like really supportive. They think it's the coolest thing ever. And they were building a brand new bathroom with showers right next to where I wanted to put my container. So it was amazing. But it's like off the street. You can't see it from the street. But it has access to like a walking track that goes around a river and everything. So if anyone was silly enough to enjoy cardio, they could do that.
There's nothing wrong with walking along a river.
In the pictures, it looks delightful. That was my first thought.
But it looks like there's a decent amount of light in it too. How hard was it for you to actually take this just metal box and turn it into what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, look, it was easy to, in terms of the construction, it was easy, but fitting the equipment in was so hard. And I started trying to draw up a plan on paper before it was built, and I just couldn't. I had to be in there feeling how much space there was. It wasn't enough to say like, oh, how much room do I need either side of a barbell on a squat rack? You know, I had to wait until I was in there. So
figure it out.
Yeah, but it was hard work. It was a lot of physical labor.
But once you had it up there, and once you had clients working with you in there, did they respond positively to this space as opposed to a gym?
Yeah, so I'm like a magnet for social anxiety because it's so intimate and personal, and there's no one training around us. It's not, a commercial gym. They don't have to have a membership to be there, obviously. So yeah, it's really good for people who are like too nervous to go to the gym, which is amazing. Like, it's really cool when someone comes to me and they're like, I've wanted to do this with someone for years, but I've just been too scared, and now there's like this safe place I can go.
Yeah, I can see why people want to push you towards Snapchat and some of those more visual apps, because yours is like one of the more Pinterest-worthy lifting spaces that I've seen.
Yeah, it's very aesthetic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very zen, which is weird because it's powerlifting and you wouldn't think those two things would go together.
Yeah.
But it feels like a space where you could be safe to actually explore something like lifting heavy weight off the ground.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think too, like powerlifting gyms, generally speaking, definitely in Australia, they are warehouses with concrete walls.
Right, they're old school.
Yeah, some of them don't have rubber flooring all over the place. Some of them you're lifting on concrete. So yeah, it's very aesthetic in that sense. But my friends walk in there and they're like, is this owned by like a chick with tattoos that rides a Harley? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm a multifaceted woman, okay?
That's right. What sort of goals do women come to you asking about for their training? Do people come to you saying specifically like, yeah, I've wanted to get into powerlifting, but I didn't like it in the gym, or do they bring a broad range of goals to you? There
are a few, like I call them Gen Pop people, who are just like, hey, I just want to like look better, I want to move, I want to get strong. Like, but most of my clients are powerlifting specific. Like, I guess I specialize in powerlifting. It's what I do, and so most people want to compete in powerlifting.
So it's getting more popular in Australia as well as in the United States in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, probably at a slower rate, I think. Yeah. I think there's like, in terms of, I think you guys call it geared lifting, like equipped lifting.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's like 70-something people registered in Australia in equipped lifting. Like, it's nothing.
That's like 10% of the population there, isn't it? Now, one thing I've also seen you doing a lot of recently is strongman training. Is that something that you have pursued competitively at all, or do you just treat it as cross-training?
A bit of both. So I do compete in strongman, but I don't really train it that much. It's kind of like an off-season thing for me to do. It just keeps me stimulated a bit. And like, let's face it, powerlifting is so boring. Like, squat, bench, and deadlift is very repetitive. And a lot of the strongman events overlap. So there's a lot of like, if you're good at deadlifting, you're good at like probably 20% of strongman, and if you're good at bench pressing, then you're probably good at overhead, which is 30% of the sport probably. Right. It's just a moving that's hard for me. It
is fun though. It is a fun style of training.
Yeah,
and I feel like it's getting really popular here as well. I've attended a few strongman events, and there are a ton of women of all body types, all ages there, that are clearly drawn to it in a similar way that it seems like a lot of women are drawn to powerlifting.
Yeah.
I don't know how if somebody came to you and they couldn't decide between the two of them, how would you help them decide?
How lazy are you? Because powerlifting is a lot better if you're lazier, because it's so static, I take 10 minutes rest in between my sets. But I think what I like about strongman is that it's rough around the edges. I like that. I grew up on a hobby farm and I loved having my hands dirty. And then I work in like this clinical environment as a nurse. And it's just nice to like go in there, get covered in chalk, like stone tacky, and come out with like literal wounds all over my body.
Oh yeah. No, everybody comes out with blood somewhere.
Yeah, which is not great when you're a model, right? Like, there's only so much Photoshop you can do to get like a stone rash off your forearms. But
yeah, one other thing I like about strongman is I feel like it's often driven by people who create their own equipment and things like that. Like, powerlifting is so fairly strict in terms of, all right, we have equipment, we have standards.
Yes.
Strongman is pretty homegrown still.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like, I think powerlifters become, I think the more experience you get as a powerlifter, the more of a princess you become in terms of like, I need calibrated plates all the time. Right. I need a squat bar. I need a deadlift bar. I need, the ground, it has to be a perfect weightlifting platform. And I feel like strongman, like I've done competitions where it's on a road. So you're standing on an angle in the street, trying to overhead press with the sun in your eyes. But yeah, and I feel like strongman people just don't complain as much, or like if the weights aren't perfect or if the judging's not perfect, people are like, oh, I'll do my best,
Sure. Do you, what's your favorite event in strongman?
I think we like what we're good at and we're good at what we like. Right. So I really like Monster Dumbbell. I very, very, very briefly held the Australian record twice in Monster Dumbbell.
Wow. With what weight?
I don't want to get this wrong. I feel like 42 kilos. Don't quote me. Yeah.
And those big, thick-handled circus dumbbells.
Yeah,
That's
right.
pretty fun.
Yeah, it's cool. There's a Record Breakers event that's new to Australia for Strongman. I'm going to try and sneak in there this year and try and get the record back. But I have a rivalry with a girl in Queensland, and we have a bet going on. She wants the record as well. I took it off her. So the loser has to do a Les Mills class, like a pump class.
Oh, there you go.
Do you find that, I mean, one thing I like about Strongman and some of the events in it, like, you know, truck pulls and things like that, it's a very different style of moving. It's not just 2 feet on the ground, 2 hands on the bar, push as hard as you can. Do you feel like that's helped you in powerlifting at all, or helped you become more resilient? You mentioned you have back issues. Has it made it worse, made it better?
I think it's made it better in that, like, I think when I hurt my back and I couldn't squat, I'm the first to admit that I don't think I did everything I could have done to maintain my squat strength. I think there was a little bit of an element of like, oh, well, I can't squat and stuff. There's no point. And, you know, I could have probably been doing Zercher squats, and I could have probably been doing more front squats and just more leg accessories. And I don't think that I did the most that I could have done. But then I think I switched my focus to Strongman, and I was moving, I was lifting, I was, you know, stone loading, like you're using your legs and all these things. So that probably picked up a bit of the slack for me. But there's definitely a huge carryover. Like if you're good at one, you're going to be fairly good at the other, I think.
Sure. Okay, well, we really appreciate you coming and talking with us. You have a busy day here. You and Heather talked yesterday. We have a bunch of articles forthcoming about power lifts, about what sort of things are we going to be talking about?
Accessory lifts and just, you know, everything that she kind of touched on. So it's going to be exciting.
Cool. We'll look for it on Bodybuilding.com in the months to come. Paige Mills, thanks so much for coming and talking with us. How do people find you online? You mentioned not Snapchat, but you're definitely on Instagram.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I definitely favour Instagram. My Instagram name is Bikerbiddy, so you can look me up and have a look at my ugly mug there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks, guys.